Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. I'm your host, Lily Allen Duenas. Together, we'll talk about the world of yoga and we'll talk to people from around the world. Join us for authentic conversations about the global yoga ecosystem, and we'll cover yoga philosophies and methodologies along the way. Inhale, exhale. We're about to dive in. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Ege onto the podcast. So Egemen Sanli is a yoga teacher from Turkey who's now located back home in Northern California. He's actually in Oakland in the Bay Area, and he is not just a yoga teacher. He's also a modern dervish in world music, carrying the flag of his Turkish roots as a musician along the way. Ege plays the sitar alongside other ethnic instruments, including the handpan drums and flutes. And he brings out this amazing, mystic, and invigorating quality out of all of these instruments that he does play. So I hope you are as excited to hear Ege's story as I am and to hear about his journey. So please join me in welcoming him onto the podcast. Thank you, Ege, so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk yoga and music.
Our philosophies and what we're feeling and our journeys. And so I'd love to just start from the top and ask you, Ege, how you got started doing yoga.
How did I get started doing yoga? It's just like many things, it's a little bit of a long story, but I'm gonna keep it short. I went into a yoga studio first to play music, to play my sitar. Back in 2009, I want to say, and I remember the studio. It was Laughing Lotus in New York City, and I responded to maybe they responded to my Craigslist ad, and they said, "Hey, we have this yoga class Friday night live, 10 p.m. to 12 p.m., 12 a.m. on a Friday, and we bring musicians. You want to come play?" So that was the first time I was in a yoga studio, and for many years after that, my interaction with the yoga world has been through music. So I've played in yoga classes for many years before I actually rolled out my mat and came to downward facing dog. So that happened many years later when I moved to California. I just wanted to grow my understanding of what happens in a yoga class. How does sequencing work? What types of yoga are there? As a mean to open myself up as a musician, meet more teachers who would want me to come play for them. So I had different goals when I first started going to yoga classes and learning about it, but it was very quick that I've started realizing that there's a lot there for me to explore. So probably less than a year after I started doing yoga, I decided that I want to do my 200th hour training and become a instructor.
You played music for years in yoga studios before you actually rolled out your mat and came into a downward facing dog. That made me laugh. I think that coming through into yoga from this not outside perspective, right? I mean, you're not an outsider. You're a creative, spiritual, and passionate person. Do you feel like when you stepped foot into that yoga studio the very first time or the first few times, did you feel at all confused or alienated or ill at ease, or did you kind of immediately get into the flow of the energy that a yoga room creates?
Probably a mixture of a lot of those, but I grew up with sports. I played a lot of sports. In my early 20s, I was a fighter. I've done kickboxing, Thai kickboxing, Muay Thai. So I've always been a very physical person. And I was still fighting when I started doing yoga. And I remember my first or second class, I went to my teacher, Annie Carpenter's class back in the Yoga 3 days here. Yoga 3 used to be a really big studio chain in San Francisco area. They're bankrupt now because of the pandemic and they don't exist anymore. But so I remember going into Annie Carpenter's class, and I think we were in Warrior 2, and I had my shoulders all the way up to my ears, just holding everything so tight. She came over to me and started poking at my shoulders and said, "I don't want this in my class. Don't bring this in my class." And that was the moment for me. I was hooked because that reminded me a lot of the, tough love, but also joyful, funny uh, coaches I had throughout the years. I've worked with a lot of like coaches from Thailand, and they're so cheerful and so loving, but at the same time they're serious about their craft, and they are uh, they have that tough love. So when I felt that from Annie back in the day, I was immediately hooked. So I welcomed all the challenge. I welcomed all the learning that I was about to enter into. And I wasn't nervous at all. I felt home, like the San Francisco yoga community, as you might know, or the Bay Area at large, is just always so welcoming. It's so huge and so accepting. So I felt home right away. It was really good to find a new community as well. So that just got things started.
This in my class, poke poke. I definitely have a lot of those phrases and little jokes, right? These, but they're powerful messages, in fact, that I know some of my yoga teachers along the way have given me as well. And we were talking quite a bit so far about yoga scene in San Francisco, but I know you've also taught yoga in Turkey. You go back every year, and you're involved in that community as well. There, could you tell us more about yoga in Turkey?
Absolutely. So I grew up there. I moved to US when I was 18, about 18 years ago. So, coming from a yoga community that's been more established into developing yoga community, last couple of years have been quite interesting, and I'm so impressed. I think they're doing wonderful things in Turkey. There's so many great teachers, and a lot of young people are getting more and more into yoga. And just like generally here in North America, we see yoga people come into yoga as a way of living healthy, like as a way of physical practice. And then as they dive in more and more, they find out that it's a life philosophy. So I'm seeing a lot of that transition in Turkey, with my friends who are teachers there, studio owners, retreat center owners. What I'm seeing is that maybe like 5 6 years ago, it was more focused on the hatha, on the physical, and now it's starting to get deeper and deeper, and more people are translating Sanskrit language into Turkish. There's more focus on meditation, retreat, lifestyle, rather than being able to do a handstand, let's say. But it's the balance is definitely healthy, and I'm seeing just wonderful things happening there. What I like to do when I go to Turkey, at least once a year, I try to bring an instrument, maybe a couple instruments. My brother lives in Istanbul. I leave a couple instruments at his place. So whenever I go there, I'll call up one of my contacts, uh, one of the studios that I've been working with a lot. Their name is Jihangir Yoga. Uh, Very much the pioneer of yoga in Istanbul. So I tell them, hey, I'm coming. Let's do a class together. They'll hook me up with one of their teachers. Usually it's Chris Chavez, who moved from our area to Istanbul to become a teacher there and founded the studio along with a couple other people. And, so my experience has been mostly through music. And every time I go, I see this community growing, and it's just so lovely to witness.
5 to 6 years, there's been this transition maybe from the asana and the focus on the hatha to the subtler levels of meditation. And as you said, Sanskrit translations and things. I wanted to just see, Ege, if you had any experience with Sufi yoga. Is that burgeoning or blossoming in Turkey at all?
Sufism and yoga share a lot of philosophy. There is definitely focus on letting go of the ego. One of the main teachings in Sufism is dying before dying. You might have heard that, for example, in Buddhism as well, or in yoga. So some of these things are definitely shared. I was actually talking to my partner yesterday about, well, cultures. So let's think about Native Americans here in America, right? Um, they have the four elements: earth, fire, water, and wind. Then you go over to Tibet. Monks there have for thousands of years also had the four elements: earth, fire, water, and wind. Did they come to the same conclusions independently, or was there an ancient but complex belief system that somehow made its way to both continents? I don't know. So that's what I see when I look at Sufism. I see a lot of overlap with yoga and general philosophies. You know, um, Sufism has a lot of focus on meditation and contemplation, inquiry, and I don't really want to get too much into the modern history of Turkey, but when I was growing up, the Sufism as we know it today was like a closed box, guarded by people who are in the lineage for many many years. But through the popularization of Rumi and his poetry, a new wave started at first internationally, but that international wave reflected back and came to Turkey, opening up the way for Sufism to reach wider and wider audiences, including the youth. So what I see today are, informal dervishes all over the place. Dervishes, Sufis, who wouldn't even call themselves Sufis necessarily, but live a lifestyle that is in line with some of the Sufi principles. Again, I see a lot of great translations, books that are coming out in the topic, you know, shining a light on that 12th century um, poet and the way that philosophy developed over the years and how the message still is so strong, and it's been a big inspiration for the yoga community in Turkey. I know that for sure.
Cairo, she said that there actually is something now called Sufi yoga, where it's a yoga practice that you go with, where there's also some chanting from the Sufi roots. Is that something that's actually being practiced as well in Turkey?
Possibly, I haven't heard of combining them in a yoga context like that, but I've taught yoga classes where my focus was, maybe a poem from Rumi, and that was the contemplation for the class, let's say. So I'd read the poem in the beginning of class and just kind of bring out parts from it throughout the class and invite people to contemplate, join in, and thought experiment, let's say. I've definitely seen that. I've seen yoga retreats that have more of a Sufi focus. I have a really amazing whirling dervish dancer, professional dancer friend in Turkey, Alper. He, for example, collaborates with a lot of yoga meditation teachers and puts together these beautiful yoga retreats in which he will teach people how to whirl, how to, do some of the introductory practices of Sufism. So yes, there's definitely people doing stuff, but I haven't, that's first for me hearing Sufi yoga as let's say a trademark.
Oh, those retreats sound so amazing. Okay, I definitely will have to get the link from you so I can put it in the show notes if our listeners want to check out those yoga retreats put on there, as well as of course all of your links as well. So I think this might be the moment where I ask you my favorite question. Ege, is what is your definition of yoga?
That's a tough one, but it's for like maybe this is stealing from the actual definition, but so be it. I would probably just say it's a union of body, mind, and soul. It's a portal to remembering spirit, and I would just leave it at that.
Perfect. Yes. True definition, clean and clear. So I'd love to dive in a little bit more too and talk about your music practice and how this improvisational yoga music, how that moves through you, and how that impacts you or impacts a class, and what do you see? Could we dive into that a little?
Yes, totally. So I grew up as a musician. I played guitar growing up, just like millions and millions of people out there. I was, you know, a kid in the 90s, growing up with the rock and roll alternative music at the time, your Nirvanas, your Metallicas, and Pearl Jams and Red Hot Chili Peppers, which I love all those bands today too. But, I was obsessed with those bands, and I had a garage band that I played rhythm guitar and sang in, and we played a lot of covers. And I loved music. I loved music so much. But my struggle was I would learn a song, and then a week later, I would forget that song, how to play it. And this carried on to my my freshman year in college, where I almost gave up music because I was just not going anywhere with it. So then somehow I learned about Berkeley School of Music in Boston and learned that they have a week-long guitar program there, just a week before my semester was beginning. So I went there, and it really changed everything I know about music, and I started to put the pieces together. And that was sort of my introduction to being able to like freeing up my fingers on the instrument itself to do whatever they want. I've learned so much there in 1 week that it took me probably a year or two to unpack and practice. So I would just sit down, I would put on, blues classics, and I would just play over them. I would put on the Grateful Dead and I would just play over it. Whatever music that has an improvisational focus, I would put it on in the background, grab my guitar, and try to play with it. But my focus was, what else can I play in this song? I wasn't trying to play exactly the same as whatever the guitar player was playing in that song, but adding, what else can I add? So that became a practice on its own for about 3 years. Right about the time I was going to graduate from college, in college I had this tradition. People would come to my room and bring a music DVD, and we would watch concerts in whole in my room. This one day, my friend brought Concert for Bangladesh DVD, which is George Harrison's benefit concert for Bangladesh in 1970 in Madison Square Garden. It's basically a variety show kind of thing where each musician comes and plays a song or two. You have Van Morrison, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, George Harrison, all kinds of amazing musicians. But the concert opening is with Ravi Shankar, the very famous sitar player from India. And this was my first time seeing the sitar. I've probably heard it in recordings here and there, but I never knew anything about that instrument. I never knew that it existed. And when I saw it, something clicked. It's like a moment in a movie where you just have a flash forward into future, seeing yourself playing that instrument on a stage somewhere. So I took the dive and I bought myself a sitar. At first, my friends thought we got a new fridge in our house because it was so big. But ultimately, I started learning it. At the time, there wasn't a teacher living near me. I lived in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, back in the day, and there wasn't that much, resources. YouTube was just beginning to become popular. Maybe there was like one YouTube video that taught me how to sit with the sitar, how to hold the instrument, how to tune it. So like very simple things I learned from YouTube. I bought a couple books, but my dedication and my devotion to that instrument was just something that I've never experienced before. For the first time, I was seeing music as a practice on its own that just like yoga can eh, just engulf all of your life. And that's what was happening. I was just sitting down, playing, no teacher, but figuring out things along the way. And years went by. I kept playing, and what I've noticed over the years is that I've was able to discover my own sound. I didn't sound like anyone else anymore. I sounded like me. And that happened with the sitar. And the sitar itself is an improvisational instrument. You don't necessarily, like traditional sitar performances, are all improvised based on melodic blue frames we call ragas in the classical Indian music theory, let's say. And this is northern classical Indian music theory. The southern is a little bit different. But so when I was given these frameworks to study, but I could just be free within that framework, things opened up to me. And I realized that my talent as a musician was and is to improvise. It has been all along. And I built on that. Today, my music is still fully improvised. I don't learn songs or remember them. But everything else I do, with my beats, with my bass guitar playing, with everything else that I do, the looping is it comes from that fundamental of classical Indian music theory, which is itself based on improvisational expression. So that's where that comes from.
Oh, wow. You immediately, like, the question just jumped in my mind is when you're talking about this improvisational element of your music and how that's all you do now, and just what this joyous expression, this energy moving through you as you improvise. It made me relate it to yoga sequencing. Do you also find that your ability to improvise kind of translates to the mat as well?
Yes, and everywhere else in life, not just the yoga mat. I mean, um, it's definitely a muscle we all have to flex and keep trained. On a given day, there's always plans changing. You're being thrown curveballs, and you have to react. And being able to improvise definitely helps. One of the main reasons why I became a yoga teacher was, well, two reasons. One was, to get in with the yoga community more, to learn how a yoga class is put together, but also reflect back on my playing. What can I learn about yoga sequencing, how a class is put together, and apply that to my playing. So it went both ways. And when I probably played close to 1,000 classes so far since 2009, since that first class at Laughing Lotus in New York City. Probably have done like hundreds and hundreds of classes. And what I find that works with general sequencing of, let's say, a vinyasa class, and I don't always play in vinyasa classes, but generally, is that I start out slow. I start with what we call in Indian music an alap, where the instrumental feature, in this case, it could be the sitar, it could be something else, it could be a handpan, it could be a flute. It just plays solo, introducing the listener to the notes of the scale of the raga that we'll be exploring, basically softening them up for what's to come. And just around the time, usually, they start moving a little bit faster in the class. Maybe they're doing some sun salutations. That's when I'll start to build a light beat. It won't be crazy fast. It won't be too slow. Just around, for me, what works is like 60 beats per minute to 70 beats per minute. Something around that range usually works great when they're doing, sun salutations and standing flow following. So the beats will get added depending. Some classes are long, some classes are short. So I'm always watching what's happening. One thing that I like to do is keep it even on the left and right. So if they, let's say, did a long flow on the right side with beats on and moving music, I will make sure that not to stop the song or the beat for that side and continue it for the left. And then when they come to a neutral position, a child's pose, downward facing dog, that's when I will do my transition, maybe change an instrument. So I'm always looking for cues, what's happening in the class, what is to come. Um, but also, not getting too stuck on it because there is freedom. It's an exchange between me and the teacher and the people in the room. So it's a little bit of both. But then you climb that peak, you come up to that point where everything is moving. There's a beat, and then we start to slow it down as they go into their cool down, all the way down to shavasana. Usually for shavasana, I play a Native American flute with like a rain stick or some bird sounds in the back. So it comes into a closed circle, starting out slow, building out beats, cooling it down, all the way back down to shavasana. So I definitely get good ideas from going to classes, and each time something magical happens.
Yeah, something magical does happen with live music and yoga. I've had the honor of having a acoustic guitar player join me just one time when I was teaching in the States, and it was so beautiful and such an exchange. I mean, no eye contact, no signals, no secret messages being sent, but just the energy and the attention that the musician was playing. I thought was giving to the class and to the cues was really beautiful. And I wanted just to get your opinion on how do you think music transforms a space for yoga?
I think it becomes the soundtrack, with the right musician, with the right, under the right context, it becomes the auditory element to what's happening. you know I mean, I'm a music buff. I love music, and I love the fact that we can record music, but recorded music doesn't have that same dynamic alive feeling compared to live music. There's that dynamic element, that living, breathing thing happening where the musician is setting the tone, setting the heartbeat for everyone else in the room. You might have heard they do this experiment with grandfather clocks. They put them all in the same room, and given enough time, they sync up. You know, uh, that's what happens in a yoga class with live music. Everybody starts breathing the same. Everybody, including the musician, get into the same vibrational space. So I think there's a lot that live music can add to a yoga class.
Absolutely. And I know that even human hearts will sync up just after a few minutes if if bodies are pressed together, the heartbeat will sync. I'm glad that you brought that up about the, yeah, that union, that joining together of multiple elements affects the students in the room in the way that it can sync up even, their heart, their pulse, everything can be kind of the synergy, right? The union. So I wanted also to ask you, you write music, or excuse me, you don't write music, but you play music, you improvise music based on the Yoga Sutras. That's amazing, Ege. What do you have in the works right now? I think you have a new CD out, right? Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so well, my last album with my dear friend Madhu Anziani. He's an incredible musician, a vocalist, and a beatboxer. So Madhu and I recorded 3 albums in total so far. Um, our latest project was a dedication to Goddess. Uh, we did 7 songs, each dedicated to a specific goddess from the Hindu tradition. So mantras of goddesses, Kali, Lakshmi, um, Tara, Saraswati. So these were mantras that we've been playing with already. We recorded that. The album before that is not necessarily Yoga Sutras, but to me, they're a lot more juicier than and livelier than Yoga Sutras themselves. Is based on the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, an ancient tantric text from Kashmir, India. I think it's like definitely over 1,000 years old. Lauren Roche, a poet from California, he translated it into the Radiant Sutras, but he also wrote poems that were inspired by the sutras themselves. And one day we were doing a backyard concert for one of our friends with Madhu, and he brought the book with him. And, we would open to a page and make a song. We would open to another page and make a song. And we saw that there was a lot of good there. So we went back and recorded an album called Body of Ecstasy, which is one of the sutras. And I love this text because it's very embodied. Sometimes in Yoga Sutras, I at least the translations that I've been in, been listening to or reading about, have more focus on like getting rid of the world and letting everything go for in order to be liberated. Well, in general Tantra philosophy and in Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, the focus is on both. It's like what Jesus said, being in this world but not of this world. So how can you embody everything that you know, but also live a life, be a person, you know, play your dharma role at the same time. So I really was so inspired by that text, which we turned into an album today.
Thank you for sharing that. And can people tune into your your album or buy your album on iTunes or listen on Spotify, all of the channels we'd expect it would be on? Is it there?
It's everywhere. Yes, iTunes, Spotify. We don't. I don't have everything released on iTunes and Spotify or some of those major platforms. Those are more polished, put together albums, which is a great way to get into what I do. But if you want to find out even more, my YouTube channel, my SoundCloud will have other recordings that haven't been officially published. For example, sometimes Madhu and I will go and play at a ceremony. There's an Indian reservation down here that invites us to come and play music for them every once in a while. And I record those live sessions and I will publish them later just for free. So um, iTunes, Spotify, those kind of platforms, you will find more of our quote unquote studio albums. But everywhere else, you'll find more. There's definitely more on my YouTube channel.
Great. I will make sure to link everything here in the show notes. So, my dear listener, wherever you are listening to this podcast currently, whether it's Google Podcast or even if you asked Alexa to play it for you, which you can do now. How cool is that? The links will be in the show notes as well as on my website, wildyogatribe.com. So, make sure you tune in because I can't wait to do a yoga practice and listen to Ege's music. I know it won't be the same as having him in the room with me, but I'm really excited about that opportunity that you're offering to us to get to play or to play with, right? It's this dance. I'm excited to improvise a vinyasa flow and pair it to your music.
Yeah, thank you. Let me know how you like it.
And Ege also has a podcast. It's called Live Yoga Jams. So if you are listening here on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google Podcast, anywhere else, you make sure you check out Live Yoga Jams because you can just stream or download his music there as well, which is very cool. And Ege, I did want to ask. I know you work for Google too. This is amazing. Do your Google what do you call it? Your Google coworkers? Do they know about this other side of you? This amazing, or hopefully they do. But I mean, are they active? Do they listen? Do they jam with you? Or do you find support in the Google community for these endeavors?
For sure, yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have done a couple of really cool events with Google. I have done sound baths there a couple times throughout the pandemic. I did a couple like meditation and things like that, online. But yeah, it's an amazing community. I've met some awesome people that are on similar paths, and was able to collaborate with them on certain occasions. They're absolutely supportive, and they love it. We also have a huge yoga community with Google. I mean, Google has thousands of employees all over the world, and we're called, like, if you work for Google, you're called a Googler. uh, and if you like yoga and you want to join the Google Yoga community, you're called a Yoggler. So we have the Yoggler community in Google, which is really, really awesome to just be a part of because we're always sharing, what's happening. Like, I think there's a meditation program that's happening at the moment with um, really famous meditation teachers just coming to teach us. So there's always cool things happening. The Yoggler community brought Krishna Das to one of our main campus some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I was able to hang out and have lunch with him that day. So it's a very active community. We're always looking to do things, and it's really amazing to see how working at a company doesn't mean that we can't share what happens outside of the office. On the contrary, what I found so amazing at Google is that it's encouraged and incentivized.
Wow, oh, that's amazing. I love that you're a Yoggler, a Googler and a Yoggler. It's glad you shared that. That's a little sneak peek inside of Google for all of us who have probably, gazed longingly at opportunities there. So how cool. And Ege, I just can't resist. When you brought up Laughing Lotus outside of in New York City, did you ever work with Jasmine Tarkishi? She's actually the co-founder of Laughing Yoga.
I've definitely have. We know each other. I've played, so my previous living space was on the same street as the Laughing Lotus San Francisco. So whenever she would invite me to come play, I would just have to literally take my instrument, walk down the street, and go play. Yeah, so I know her well, and she's awesome.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, she's just such a delight. I don't know her personally, but I've taken a lot of her classes online, and she is just bubbling, effervescent energy. It must have been just so fun to be around that teaching style.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Ege, I wanted just to say thank you so much for joining me today and for having this beautiful conversation. I really feel like it was so meaningful, and I learned so much about improvisation and how music transforms and infuses spaces and can engulf, all your energy. And I just feel so grateful for it. So thank you for being here with me.
It's my pleasure, Lily. Thank you so much. To be a part of this podcast is really exciting. I hope it grows. I hope that I love the idea of seeing how yoga is going globally in different countries. So I went back and listened to a couple of the episodes. I think you're doing something wonderful here. I wish the best of luck for what's to come for this project.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast with Ege from Turkey, talking about the progression of yoga in Turkey from asana to the subtler levels, also about Sufism and Rumi, and even about the pioneers of yoga in Istanbul. I thought that was just so meaningful and compelling. And also getting to talk about Ege's path, not just of yoga, but of music as well, and how his improvisational yoga music has become a heartbeat for yoga classes, a dynamic and alive element that can even kind of help unify a room and harmonize a room full of yoga practitioners even more. So I hope you found this conversation to be as compelling as I did. Thank you for the gift of your precious time. Dear listener, be well. Thank you for being on this journey with me. It has been a privilege to be with you. I know that your time is precious, and I am both humbled and honored that you chose to spend your time with me here on the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. As you are on your own inner journey, remember that you are not alone. There are so many of us on this path to awakening, this path of self-discovery and expansion, and we are right here alongside you. Remember to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you feel called, please share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. Leaving a review would also be so appreciated. If you're on social media, I am there too at the Wild Yoga Tribe. You can tap into all the amazing resources on my website, thewildyogatribe.com, and you can meditate with me on Insight Timer and get your flow on with me on my YouTube channel, where I've recorded free yoga classes. If you would like to schedule a private yoga or meditation class with me or a coaching session, you can find the link to do so to book in the show notes or on my website. Again, thewildyogatribe.com. Thank you once again, dear listener, for being with me. May your day be light and bright. May you be peaceful and happy and led on the right path, free of suffering and free of sorrow. Be well, dear one. Be well.